Hi everyone. Good morning and good evening to our guests who have been joining us from a different part of the world. Thank you so much for all being here and welcome to yet another fascinating discussion at the India Toy Fair. Just to set the context for the session and talk about this particular topic which really fascinates me. Over my last 5 years in the toy industry and my journey, I think I've come to realize that while the finished product that we see in our hands or the hands of a child that brings so much amount of joy and looks simple enough, it's actually a mechanical marvel, and I think it takes a tremendous amount of skill and effort to put it together. Depending upon whether it's a simple pull along toy with lights and sounds to help a toddler develop motor skills, or a doll or an action figure with hair accessories for a child to enhance their role playing experience, or even an electronic toy for, let's say, a teen to build a basic understanding of robotics. The variety that's available for children today in the toy and the game industry is enormous and breathtaking, honestly. And each of these, I think, involve a very complicated manufacturing process and cutting edge technologies, including technologies like precision molding, automated hair routing, mechatronics, inkjet printing, digital and physical prototyping, and so many others. And as you can imagine, there's a ton of work that goes into ensuring that the toy works exactly the way it's supposed to and delivers the play experience exactly the way it's supposed to. Now, imagine the level of creativity and capability that is required to foresee the end state of these marvelous innovations that we see every day around us. And that, I think, is a fascinating world of toy designing that we shall explore in today's session. Toy designing, as you can imagine, is quite a complex yet a fulfilling experience, and I'm sure our speakers today will attest to that. They are the playmakers who understand the principles of play more than anybody else. And in today's discussion, we'll focus on the evolution of design and innovations in the toy industry, promoting arts and design as an educational tool, and understanding the future trends in the industry. So, without much further ado, let me begin by a brief introduction to our panelists today. Um, First of all, Sri Praveen Nahar, who is the director of National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, with its extensive campuses in Gandhinagar and Bangalore. He's also been a faculty member in product design discipline at NID since 2002. He has over 23 years of experience in design teaching, consultancy, and research. Prior to joining NID, he also worked as a research associate in transportation research at IIT Delhi for 2 years. Mr. Nah has been on the Institute Senate and Policy Planning Committee for several years and has served in various positions in NID as activity chairperson of various departments. Mr. Naha studied production engineering at undergraduate level. He did his master's in industrial design from IIT Delhi, in addition to pursuing a postgraduate course in sustainable design from Delft University of Technology, Netherlands. Welcome, Mr. Nahar, to the session. Sydney Weisman is the creator of award-winning brands at Wowie. She envisioned product ranges that appeal to children, retailers, and media influencers around the world. She has a finger on the pulse for identifying hot new trends. Miss Weisman's Fingerlings brand of animatronic pets and characters created a worldwide frenzy, becoming the number one toy brand across multiple countries. And I can tell you, Sydney, I myself was witness to that as I was leading the toy industry and sort of work for Hasbro in India. The brand won several coveted awards, Toy of the Year award from the American Toy Association in 2018, as well as the Collectible Toy of the Year. Sydney was honored by the international organization Women in Toys with the Wonder Woman in Toys award for her work as Creator Innovator of the Year. Sydney graduated from the McGill University with a major in business and resides in her hometown of Montreal, Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Sydney, to the session. And finally, we have Jared Wade, Senior Vice President, Design and Innovation of Hasbro. At Hasbro, Jared leads a team of world-class innovators, researchers, and inventor relations experts charged with igniting internal and external product innovation. This includes a team of design and development specialists equipped to supercharge white space opportunities and new technologies. Jared started his career as a product designer and over the years has led many significant design and development teams around the globe, working on iconic brands like Transformers, My Little Pony, Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, Nerf, Play School. I should say all my favorites in Hasbro. Uh, Jared is a graduate of the University of Cincinnati College of Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning. And in fact, Jared also led a very, very interesting session in the Ahmedabad Design Week that occurred a couple of weeks ago, and shared his insights and his views on design and development. And I think we got some amazing feedback on that session. So welcome again, Jared, and thank you so much for making the time to make this session.
Nice to be here.
Great. So why don't we jump into the meat of the session and the interesting questions? The first one that I would like to start with and ask Sydney to comment on, and then I would love to hear views from also Jared and Ms. Nahar, is we have insights, we have materials, and we have trends. Sydney, what makes a great toy out of all of these?
Say it's probably a hybrid of all three. I think where we're concerned at Wowie, what we really try and do is be ahead of the trends or see where the trends are going. I think a lot of time, like making a great toy is really just spending a lot of time with kids and seeing really how they play. And then really trying to make something that makes it has to resonate in a kid's hand. And I think it's like we always say at work, it's an art, not a science. Like there's no rules. There's no right way of doing things. It's like it's the little I think what we really try and do, and I think a lot of the brands, especially that I try and create, are very much how do I bring a movie into the hand of a kid? How do we really create IP that literally lives with them wherever they go? And whether it's something as simple as blowing in a fingerling's face and it kissing you back and it feeling like, wow, my toy just kissed me, or like we have these little dumplings for this year, and when you squeeze their cheeks, their body pops out, and like that, like just like the reaction that you get from kids just with these little pieces of magic. I really think that's what ends up making a toy really great.
No, that's a wonderful perspective, Sydney. Thank you. Mr. Nahar, what would be your thoughts on this?
So the same what Sydney said, all are important, and of all the three to make a great toy. If you see from user's perspective and from the child perspective, it's only the play experience. One gets actually. In order to make a good toy, I think designers should have a primarily good insights, of course, and be able to perceive and understand the play experience from the child's point of view. And I think understanding them in terms of developmental needs, play experiences is something designers are able to do the best. And yes, of course, they should be also aware of materials trends, markets, safety guidelines, environmental issues, so on and so forth. Elements of play, human development, psychology, game theories, all those things are also very important, I think.
So then, Ms. Nahar, it's not just about insight trends, materials and trends. It's also an interesting dimension of technical know-how that you just added into the mix.
Yeah, sure, all that.
Now, that's a wonderful perspective. Thank you. Jared, what would be your take on what Mr. Nahar said or the question and understanding kind of the child's point of view in this?
I totally agree with what Sydney and Mr. Nahar said, especially that addition of the technical expertise, because if you can't make it correctly and effectively, then the rest of the insights don't matter if you can't deliver it. To me, I think insights from a design perspective really are the reason for the thing that informs the design decisions, whether that's materials or how to apply a trend and context to a certain play experience. So as a designer, I always value that starting with the insight of how it connects with the child. And as both panelists had mentioned, that observation of how a child plays. We're lucky enough to have a research group in our team called the Fun Lab, which is a group that allows us to directly observe, do observational research of kids in their homes, in our facilities. And there's no better way for a designer to understand how to develop a toy than to see a child play with it right in front of them, see where it could be frustrating, see where they're getting especially joy out of it, and using that to inform your design. So that level of insight to me is invaluable in making sure you're possible.
Thank you, Jared. And I wonder where were the Fun Labs when I was a child. I would have loved to be a part of one, even now for that matter.
Can I join?
Absolutely. Now that I think is again some really great perspectives on that aspect, and we would explore that a little further going forward into the session. But the next question is for Mr. Nahar. I would love to know your views on this. Now, Mr. Nar, with the growth of the toy industry in India and a focus on making in India, we definitely feel that we need to nurture and build the talent in design and the arts industry in India, right? And that's a as you heard also from the answers in from your colleagues in the panel, that I think is an extremely important capability for us to build on and develop on to be a success in India for the toy industry. How do you think we can encourage more interdisciplinary curriculum to promote art and design from a very young age, all
Yes.
throughout till higher education? I would love to know your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, we need to put, art and design at a very school level curriculum, multidisciplinary, hands-on experimentation needs to be part of education. And exposure to all disciplines and expressions through all senses are very important. As they move ahead in higher levels, they should have choices while they are guided towards higher goals of developing thinking, creativity, and ability to express. Now, in our new education policy in India, which is already focuses on multidisciplinarity and STEAM education approaches like using science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, as access points to guide students' inquiry, dialogue, and critical thinking. And of course, design education is all over the world, which is very, very transdisciplinary and in its nature, and which integrates synthesis of many domains through its sensibilities, and which can be applied into various sectors of domain. And I mean, play and games and toys are one of such domain. At NID, NID is a very old institution, about 60-year-old, and we have many disciplines. But interestingly, with the increasing focus on play, toy, games, and the passion of some of the faculties, we started toy design program actually about 20 years back, almost like 2001, 2002, and which is a master's program which actually adopts play-centric approaches to design, in sectors like education, health, entertainment. Craft and folk traditions in toys is very, very, very important part of that program, and it's very progressive in nature with courses which involves not only design fundamentals with materials, media arts, cultural studies, user psychology, methodologies into understanding complex systems, and how do you intervene and build scenarios, play game theories, character design, user research methods. So the project-based pedagogies, which also helps people to build interesting. So not only from schools, from design education, from programs, special programs which focuses, in such programs would really help to grow in this kind of sector and setting. So and of course you need a lot of maker labs, hacker labs, making people really should be able to make play fun, all this kind of stuff.
And I think it's a really interesting perspective, Mr. Nahar, because as you mentioned, I think looking at the scope of where we are with respect to the focus on the toy industry in India today, and especially looking at that from a context of what is happening in the new education policy and how that is changing, and how toy-based learning and and inclusion of that in pedagogy is going to be a big determinant
Yes.
Of how children will learn and grow and develop, with that big change. I genuinely believe NID has a big role to play in defining that and sort of influencing that, and also to exactly your point, building in that aspect of art and design and curriculum, and having and encouraging schools to be able to include that in their program. So I think that's a great way to go, and I believe with that kind of a start, we might be able to see a lot more Sydneys and Jareds in India, coming up at a much more younger age.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. That's a great perspective, Ms. Nahar. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jared, my next question is to you. As you're aware, kids get easily bored after a few hours of playing with a toy. during the design process, and you mentioned that brilliantly in sort of your setup, that you look at insights of what this could translate into and last for a kid when he's playing with that toy. How do you manage to bring together all the elements of play into that one toy and game that hold the child's attention? What role does trend spotting play, for example, in the whole process? And how do you kind of keep that up with the dynamic consumer, which is, whose needs are changing all the time?
Yeah. I think insights definitely lean heavily into that, and staying on top of trends and understanding what trends have the right life cycle to and when to jump onto them is of course important. But when it comes to kind of the length of play, the repeatability, to me, it really comes down to storytelling. And there's ways to do storytelling through trends. But I think that idea of sparking the kid's imagination in just the right way is really the secret to creating longevity in a toy and repeatability. In the Hasbro portfolio, Play-Doh is a great example, I think. I have a 4-year-old at home here, and she plays with Play-Doh more than any other tool for hours and hours, just because there's so many endless stories she can tell and create and redo. And it gets a lot of use in our household. But the brand's been around for 65 years, and yet we've been able to introduce new themes and play sets and tools and ways to play. But those are all just story starters that are meant to kind of set the kid off on a new path where they're using their own imagination to create the story in the world around them. So I think the same applies to action figures and dolls and games. If you can create that compelling story through the design or the function, then the kid's imagination will take over and be able to kind of extend that play, and they'll go back to that toy because it unlocks that magic for them.
Again, a great idea and insight there. I think the whole concept of repeatability coming alive and how the toy continues to engage the child and to your point, unleash imagination and creativity, I think is such a important and determinant factor in increasing longevity. Really, really well said. Um, Sydney, I would definitely love to have your view on that, but also then follow that up with a different question. What do you think of that response?
I totally agree. I think a little, not different, like wishing that we end up with something as long as Play-Doh for sure in our hopper. But I really do think that the beauty of what we do is really allowing kids to really create their own stories. And I think it's exactly what Jared said, is that we're offering the tools. We're the starting point. We do a fingerling, sure, we determined what we think kids are going to want to do with it. But then you go on YouTube and you see the things, they've dressed up their monkeys and they've created their own clothes for them, and it's like, okay, that's so cool that we have or kind of take what we're offering and really just bring it to the next level for their own play experience, and then watch that and then see how we can take what they're doing with it to then reiterate and make even a better story for kids in the next round.
And it's amazing, right? I mean, I think for us, when we see a physical form factor of a toy, and we I don't even think we can start to imagine the directions in which the kids can take it into, right? I mean, for us, it's something that interprets and sees it as a very, very physical manifestation of what we wanted to create. But for the kid, I think it can assume so many different creative forms and ways and unleash their imagination. So I think that's just an absolutely fascinating aspect of how designers read that trend and are able to kind of perceive that and turn that into reality. I have to say it's an envious job. With me having no imagination whatsoever to be able to try that.
You have to be a kid at heart, honestly.
Oh,
Like I
yeah.
could tell all of us on this call, everyone is very much really a kid at heart. And that's like, I think that's where a lot of the magic comes from. Like I see it in Jared's smile, like we love toys. And I think as much as we always love toys and we want to make kids love the toys that we're making, we're always gonna try and make our best toys possible.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Sydney. This is, by the way, a kind of a question to you, Sydney. This is, and this is essentially about how I think increasingly because of the lockdown, we've all experienced this. We've all been talking about it. It's probably the hottest thing that always gets discussed, but digital is taking over our lives, right? Especially children with, endless hours of online studies, screen time, etc. Obviously, there is also an emergence of other technologies to sort of support this momentum, like voice technology and AI. In such a scenario, how do you think design teams can keep pace with the growth of digital and design toys that weave together these two worlds, right, for a multidimensional, multi-layered kind of experience?
I think it's a really, really interesting question and something that we really do talk a lot about at WowWee. I think what we're really seeing is that IP comes from everywhere. Like you could have a toy that turns into the best TV show, or you can have a TV show that then turns into the best toy, or you can have a song like Baby Shark that becomes a viral sensation and is now a huge brand. I think what we're learning from all of this is that number one, there is no right way of doing things anymore, and there's no real path to getting to where you want to go. So that your best bet is to be touching all touch points. So to that point, I think where our expertise, sure, we're really good at making the toy that probably will lend itself to IP. But having this little guy isn't enough. I need to make sure that when a kid is on YouTube, they're seeing him dance on YouTube. Or then I need to make sure that when they're in a Roblox world, there's a Squishy Littles world that they can play in with their little dumplings. And then even one step further, like back to the whole AI and the whole, especially the voice rec thing, like Alexa, play a dumpling song, you know, all of these touch points are really what contributes to your point, kids are everywhere. They're the most multifaceted. They're on their screen while they're on their phone, while they're watching TV, while they're playing Lego, you know? So I think it's making sure that we tap into all of that. And I think where we're at from a toy design standpoint is great, this is going to be great in my hand, but how will it translate to a show, to music, to every other element of the world in which kids are? And I think if we really start focusing like that, hopefully one of them will hit, and then our chances of creating a really tremendous IP will be that much better.
No, you're so right, Sydney. Because sorry, go ahead. You want to add to that?
Oh no, I was probably just agreeing and shaking my head. I think what Sydney said is true, and that being able to be where kids are engaging is so important, and especially when it comes to technology, we know that is moving so fast. Our goal is to be there and be ready, right experiences when the kids are there. So, always staying one step ahead is the goal. Yes.
Oh, thank you, and you're so right, Sydney. I think the concept of keeping that in mind, keeping the whole digital element in mind as we're designing toys is so important. And I think even if I look at the journey of so many brands that have been successful over the recent years, there is definitely a distinctive difference, and also from a longevity standpoint on how they see success because of exactly this approach, and ensuring that they are present in almost a 360 manner in the child's life or the consumer's life through different manifestations of the toy, whether it's physical, whether it's digital, whether it's some other aspect. And I think that's a really interesting insight to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Mr. Nahar, I would love to kind of address that as a follow-up question again to you. Do you think that when we keep in context what we heard from Sydney and from Jared, does this change the way children would play with toys and games? Is there a different way in which they would interact? What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah. See, I think you're talking in terms of the technology, and
Absolutely.
I can see that there are two things. One is towards a technology-driven futuristic scenarios, and another is a low technology, more physical, tangible, and natural elements of playing. And I mean, the dimensions are blurring. Technology is becoming more and more nearer, and physical and digital worlds are merging. But I see that in India, I mean, you need both approaches of high tech, but also it has to be low cost, especially for which is India, which is very non-homogeneous country, and technologies like augmented reality, motion sensors, mixed reality, all those things give you a huge playground to explore new ideas. That gives scope for including bringing multi-dimensional play experiences, and also incorporate developmental benefits of play. So I mean, also as there are impacts of environments and the surrounding and the cultures when we are in, and how that sort of come and integrates in the whole thing. So yeah, I mean the the technology is going to is playing very important role, and you need to know where it connects and where it helps you disconnect in our play experiences. Yeah.
No, yeah, and I think I quite like what you mentioned, Ms. Nahar, in terms of how innovation in India and really success on this aspect can only be found truly when we are able to, of course, use high tech technology or sort of interesting aspects of this development in toys, but really make them at an acceptable cost.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I think so many multinationals look at when they look at India is obviously the scale, but a very important aspect of success also is the price value equation that we need to hit to be able to see that scale. And I think that's going to be a really important determinant of what goes into toy designing, especially when you want to see success in large scale, distribution-led, mass market-led organizations and countries like India or China or other such markets. So I think that's an interesting insight to kind of keep in mind as we look at this journey going forward.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Nar, on that one. The other one, the other aspect that I find really interesting, Jared, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that, is parents are increasingly looking for toys and games that provide an educational benefit, to kids. And I know, especially again in markets like in India, this is a very important aspect, and that's also the reason why I think games see a huge amount of success. So obviously, beside making toys, exciting and appealing to kids, what would be your approach to making great products that can also be a developmental and a learning aid for them?
It's a good question. I was lucky enough to work in our play school business for a while, several years, and with our partners in Sesame Street, who are known for their educational product. And yeah, it really taught me as a young designer that you have to really learn about those childhood development milestones and become a student of that and understand it deeply. You can't fake that kind of educational benefit from a toy. You have to build that into the DNA. And at Hasbro, we've had a lot of lucky to have different sources of educators and doctors and other experts. And many of the designers who've been on those brands for many years have become experts themselves. But it's not as simple as applying a textbook learning to a product and making it engaging. It really does, again, go back to that direct observational research and designing a toy that really sinks in with the child and engages them in the way that the learning is applied in the best way. And it's not just about building in the lessons or the ergonomics, but it also has to have that point of being engaging and fun and the repeatable factor. Because if it doesn't have that, then the kids it won't hold their interest. So you really do have to achieve both. But the learning, you have to do the learning in an authentic way and not just a light overlay of the learning to make it really meaningful. And again, Play-Doh is a great example of that. For us, it's it teaches dexterity, it teaches colors and shapes and all of the counting even for the younger kids, but it's not really part of the express play pattern as much as it is part of the way the kids engage with it and repeat it and interact with the toy. It becomes that great learning product just by the nature of how you play with it. So one the example of benefiting from both the engagement and the developmental aspects.
And I think that again, I love that aspect of how education is also coming through based on how kids play with it, right? Rather than sort of it being engineered or almost deliberately put in and described in the form factor necessarily of a toy. And again, I think that just goes back to the point I was making earlier on how designers like yourself, Sydney, and of course some great, I'm sure, students in Mr. Nahar's institute would be able to see that and sort of bring that in early into the entire development process. So a great learning experience, and I think a great point. This is, I think, probably my last question, but to everyone in the panel, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. We all have a responsibility towards the environment, right? And there are so many organizations taking some bold and brave steps to move towards a strong sustainability program. How do you think designers can collaborate with companies to make more sustainable products with minimal damage to the environment? And of course, would love to also hear if there are any great examples in your experience that you've seen of organizations or toy organizations doing that in a sustainable manner. So, Sydney, why don't you go first? And I would love to then have Mr. Nahar comment on that, and then Jared.
Okay. Well, I think it's definitely important. And I think truly one of my biggest challenges being a toy maker is the plastic. It's like it's so conflicting, because sure, I want to sell millions of something really great, but at the same time I also don't want to destroy the world, you know? So I think what we're trying to do is, we're not going to promise we're going to change everything overnight, but we are definitely getting smarter internally, whether it's the packaging materials that we use. We actually are launching soon, in the next month, actually, our first eco program. It's these pop-up play sets that are made out of recycled cardboard. And so it's made from recycled cardboard. And then when you're done playing with it, it's actually completely recyclable. So really going into that world of, we can't do it across the board on all of our products. We're going to try and be smarter when it comes to packaging across the board there, but really offering an experience of play sets that's away from the plastic and very much into helping the environment where we can do our part. And I think it's our first line in this world, but I think having worked on this and continuously seeing what we're able to do, how much it seems very scary at first when you start thinking eco, and as you start learning it and getting more into it, it's like, oh, I could take this learning and apply it here. And oh, I can apply that there. And I think all of these little things, if every toy company just becomes a little bit more conscious of helping the environment, it will make a tremendous difference. I really do think that we're going to try for sure. So.
Absolutely. You're right, Sydney. It's a journey, right? And I think we need to kind of, pace ourselves and ensure that we are moving in the right direction on that front. Mr. Nahar, what do you think about that? I mean, isn't this also so much relevant for India and the kind of impact that we see on the environment?
Yeah, I mean, sustainability and environmental responsibility is very important. It has to be actually integral part of your toys and whatever we make, and we have to incorporate those aspects into the what we design and how the end of life of this design actually goes towards. And I think there's a lot of great awareness, and I think a lot of design schools are now incorporating and has this thing embedded. Looking into idea of recycling, repairing, refurbishing of toys, applying principle of circularity and circular economy, getting into building those, this plastic, getting into easy recycling and reuse is very important. Different cultures, different generations use a set of toys and all that. India has huge variety of natural materials. There is a tradition of using traditional toys made out of wood, coir, bamboo, clay, and other sustainable materials extensively used. There are also concepts of not owning a toy, but sharing a toy, or renting a toy, or those kind of things are also coming up now. And there are many examples, of course, within toys which are made out of plastics, and within the industry for large production, but also there are toys from like palm leaf toys from south, or to clay toys from rug dolls from across the India, toys from paper and reeds. There are many examples which actually inspires you the direct story of sustainability. But every toy we make, I think one can celebrate the idea and how that leaves a journey can be embedded into the design process itself. So it's a very important aspect to be considered, and all designers have to. There's no choice but to have this the part of process.
I think such a great point, Mr. Nair, and I love the fact that given the examples that you quoted from India on using so many sustainable materials, especially when we look at our traditional toys,
Yes.
I think that that's a great legacy and a great example that I think we are setting for the world, where most of these are made from biodegradable materials, and that's just a great way to approach that category and development. Jared, what would be your thoughts on this? And I hear Hasbro has some interesting programs around this too.
Yes, yeah, and I 100% agree with the importance of of this topic, and I am proud of where Hasbro's been with their efforts around sustainability. I'm proud of our leadership team for really driving that as a priority, and our whole organization who's so passionate about it. We were one of the first, or we were the first in the industry, I believe, to offer a toy recycling program several years ago. And more recently, we made a commitment to be completely plastic free in our packaging by the end of 2022. So those are all goals we're working towards every day, and are seeing them realized, which is really exciting to see so much change in in a very short time. And we even recently just launched a Mr. Potato Head last year that was made completely out of plant-based plastics. So that innovation in the materials that we're able to bring forward, it's on us as designers, I think, then to take those advancements and take the new technologies and find ways to implement them, as Sydney said. If we are all looking for those opportunities to make great play experiences that are also sustainable, we can really have a big impact across the organization, across the industry, across the world. So really excited to see where the industry goes from here.
Again, Jared, I think that's such a great point. And as organizations that really have such a far-reaching impact, and also brands that kids love and play with, it is definitely our responsibility to take the lead on that process and ensure that we are setting the way and sort of setting the example of doing that sustainably. So great point, and thank you so much for that perspective. I think that does bring us to the end of the session. I would just like to summarize and kind of highlight some of the interesting aspects of the discussion that I've heard so far. And of course, it all starts with kids and how I think we have the responsibility of ensuring that whatever that we are creating from a design sense or design sensibility standpoint has to resonate with the children and something that lives with them and it sustains. Understanding the child's point of view and having the technical expertise to be able to ensure and gauge what is it that is required here, not just from a trends, from insights and from materials, but also what are some of the other aspects of safety that we should keep thinking about, that we should keep in mind as we're designing these toys, I think is so critical. Starting with insights, and I think how that connects with the child and how the child plays, and sort of seeing that live, being connected to that, and ensuring those are always front and center of this process is so much critical. Art and design, I think, also in how we can encourage that through the new education policy in India, bring that in curriculum, and also use that as getting access to certain points in the program that will help guide students at an early age itself to be able to develop them in these aspects. Storytelling, and I think sparking kids' imagination also are important aspects in increasing longevity of play, and something that designers need to definitely keep in mind as we sort of do this on a sustainable manner. And of course, in this new technological savvy world, ensuring that whatever that we are designing and creating has that aspect of IT integration right from the word get-go. And ensuring that we are bringing that in at a very early stage, and even almost in our ideas and our insights is going to be critical for, again, increasing the playability of the toy, but also then ensuring that it engages the kid in the right fashion and creates that world around the kid that the kid loves to live in. Most importantly, I think, as I also heard from all the three panelists, it almost takes a family, right? Or sorry, a village to create a successful toy involving educators, doctors, designers, observational research, and so much more to ensure that what we put in the kid's hand is not just brilliant and sustainable, but it's also something that has one, of course, a long life, but also creates the right experience for the child to be engaged and learn and grow from that. And finally, I think the last aspect of the conversation around sustainability is also so important for us to keep in mind. At the end of the day, I think we all have a responsibility to create a cleaner, better world for and a better future for children. And this is something that I think is going to get more and more important as we move along in our journey of innovation in toys and toy design. So I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists who have made it, Jared, Sydney, especially for doing this at a very late hour in your respective time zones, and Mr. Nahar for finding time in your very, very busy schedule to be a part of this discussion. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you have a great day. And I look forward to more engaging sessions with you in the future.